Welcome to Buddhism Seeds, a space where we sit down together, listen to our breath, and gently remove each layer of the roles that life has wrapped around us. In a world overflowing with effort, information, and expectations, where everyone races to know more, achieve more, and become better, these gentle Zen stories come like a breeze, reminding us of something simple yet profound. Not everything needs to be understood in order to be lived. Some things cannot be explained by logic. They can only be felt through full presence. Not everything we hold on to has value. Some things reveal their true weight only when we finally let them go. Not everything sweet is love. True compassion sometimes means looking straight into each other's darkness without running away, and not every intelligent person is awakened. For sometimes knowledge itself becomes a wall, and not knowing opens the deepest door to peace. We are taught how to collect, analyze, and understand, but rarely are we taught how to stop adding more, to stop just to listen to life as it is right now, needing no improvement. And when night falls, when the lights dim and the noise fades, we come face to face with what we've avoided all day ourselves. You don't need a reason to sleep well. You just need to stop holding on. You don't have to figure everything out, just set aside the need to know and return to the present moment. Because often it is the effort to understand, to know, to control that keeps you awake. Tonight's journey is a journey of returning. Nothing to add, nothing to remove. Just breathe and let go. And if you're ready, let us begin with our first story. Mika, a young woman who tried desperately to stop her thoughts in search of silence. But beside a still lake, she learned a lesson she never expected. At dawn, the lake mirrored the trees and knew light. A soft breeze rippled the surface, then faded as if nothing had moved. In that quiet space, a young woman sat by the water motionless, yet her eyes held countless movements within. After a while, she spoke almost to herself. Why is it that the more I try to be still, the noisier my mind becomes? I meditate to find calm, yet the more I meditate, the more restless I feel. Am I doing something wrong? It wasn't a philosophical question. It was a real confusion. Like what many people feel when they lie down to rest, only to find their minds racing. Her question came from a longing for peace, but also from exhaustion, from fighting her own thoughts. Have you ever felt that way? She had been practicing meditation for some time, not casually, but with real effort. Each morning before sunrise, she spread her cushion in the center of her room, sat upright, breathed deeply, hands resting on knees, eyes half closed, mind focused on stillness. She tried to stay mindful, tried not to think, tried to clear everything past future unfinished stories within. Yet strangely, the harder she tried, the fuller her head became. A silent chaos began to rise beneath her calm surface. Old images returned, an unresolved conversation, an unhealed mistake. Then the to-do list for tomorrow, a sense of guilt, a flicker of hope, a vague worry, an unfulfilled dream. Everything appeared one after another like a parade in her mind, and none would leave. She began to strain not with her body, but with her mind. She forced herself to push away every thought that arose. She held her breath longer, commanding herself, "Don't think." She scolded herself silently for not meditating well enough, but the more she tried, the more her mind shattered like water struck by her own hand. She realized how foolish it was trying to flatten the lake by hitting it. Of course, it only stirred up more waves. Doubt crept in. Maybe she wasn't fit for meditation. Maybe she wasn't mindful enough. Or worse, maybe her mind was just too messy to ever be still. Then one morning, when she was sitting alone by the lake, the place she often went to when she felt too tired, an old monk from a nearby temple came by. He didn't say a word. He simply sat beside her, close enough to feel his presence, yet far enough not to intrude. They sat together, just wen trees, water, and a silence that felt oddly alive. After a while, he pointed toward the lake where a ripple had just faded. "Do you see?" he said softly. "The wind doesn't stop the waves. The lake doesn't fight the wind. Everything comes and goes on its own." She turned to him. He wasn't looking at her, only at the water, as if he had known it for 1,000 years. She looked back at the lake. Another ripple rose and disappeared. No one caused it. No one stopped it. Everything moved in its own rhythm. For the first time, she understood something that sounded simple. She didn't need to fight her mind, didn't need to suppress thoughts, didn't need to meditate well, didn't need to force emptiness. The lake would become still when the wind passed. The old monk spoke again, his voice lighter than the breeze. "Don't try to be still. Just stop stirring. Let things flow, and they will rest. You don't meditate to become someone. You don't meditate to change instantly. You just sit and stop stirring the water. That alone is a great beginning." From that day, she continued meditating. But instead of trying not to think, she let thoughts come and go. Instead of holding mindfulness as a task, she simply breathed. Instead of scolding herself for wandering, she smiled gently. "Oh, wandered again. Let's return." Not every session became deep, but at least she no longer shattered her own inner lake. She learned what every true meditator must learn. Early meditation is not about doing something. It's about stopping what keeps things from naturally unfolding. And since then, her sleep became softer. Because when the mind stops trying, the body finally rests. And when she stopped being the one who tried to make the lake calm, she could finally see how clearly the sky was reflected. In Zen, there's a beautiful paradox. The more you chase stillness, the more it slips away. But when you stop chasing stillness, returns like an old friend. The Buddha once compared the mind to a river. Left alone, it becomes clear. Disturb it even with good intention, and it turns muddy. The mind doesn't need cleansing, it only needs to be seen. Stillness doesn't come from blocking thoughts because thoughts aren't enemies. They are simply waves rising and fading. What tires us isn't thinking itself, but clinging to or rejecting those thoughts. True letting go isn't an action, it's an attitude. No forcing, no controlling, no attachment. When you lie down tonight, your mind may still hold many unfinished threads. An unanswered email, a sentence left unsaid, a mistake from yesterday, a plan for tomorrow. The mind doesn't stop just because you've lain down, and that's okay. You don't have to force calm, just breathe. Just listen to yourself in this moment. If a thought appears, greet it like a passing guest. No need to keep it. No need to send it away. If an emotion arises, sadness, fatigue, anger, or a nameless worry, don't analyze or suppress it. Breathe with it, as if sitting beside a friend in silence. Like the lake, when you stop stirring, it becomes still. You don't need to find stillness. Stillness has been there all along, waiting for you to stop disturbing it. You don't need advanced techniques. You don't need to meditate well. You don't need to count breaths, chant mantras, or visualize anything mystical. Just let go. Let go of controlling the mind. Let go even of the effort to stop. Because when you let go of even letting go, the mind naturally returns home. Let the mind be the mind, and you just be the one who sees. No judgment, no effort, no force. Just witnessing gently and deeply. That is how meditation carries you into sleep, not by shutting down thoughts, but by no longer mistaking them for you. They come and go like clouds drifting across the sky, and you remain still as the sky itself. Tonight you don't need to become better. You only need to be present. And from there, true rest begins. Letting go isn't giving up like someone who's lost faith. It doesn't come from despair, but from the clear knowing that holding on helps no one. Letting go is when you stop fighting life's current and begin to trust the quiet intelligence of the present moment. You can practice this each night in simple ways. 1. Sit still. Not for a goal, not to get better, not to fix anything. Just sit like the earth, expecting nothing. 2. Just breathe. Let thoughts come and go. Don't chase a pleasant feeling. Don't resist an unpleasant one. Be the sky, letting everything pass without leaving a trace. 3. Each time you notice yourself clinging, gently return to the breath. No blame, no strain, just return. This isn't meditation to achieve something. It's meditation to stop being carried away. When you no longer try to make the lake calm, the lake calms itself. When you stop chasing every thought, you find yourself standing on the shore, no longer caught in the waves. And that is when the mind truly begins to rest. And when it does, like a lake after the wind, you realize not everything needs to be fixed. After long, sleepless nights, after hours of wrestling with the fatigue inside, have you ever asked yourself, why is my mind still unsettled, even though I've tried everything? Why do I still feel empty even after trying to heal? Not everyone says it aloud, but many people carry these same questions quietly within. You've meditated, you've gone to therapy, you've read books, you've practiced breathing properly, you've journaled, sipped tea, listened to music, walked, and tried to let go. Yet something still lingers like a shadow that refuses to dissolve. When the mind isn't calm, people often believe they haven't done enough. But have you ever wondered, could it be that I'm trying too hard, and that very effort is what's keeping me from healing? Today's story begins with that question in a small fishing village, where a curious young boy learned his most profound lesson from an old man who never explained a thing. Taro was an intelligent, sensitive boy with a deep hunger to understand. He disliked shallow answers and couldn't easily let go of anything that puzzled him. To Taro, the world was like one great equation, and if he persevered long enough, every mystery would eventually reveal its solution. He lived in a small seaside village where the salty wind curled around rooftops, the waves hummed like lullabies at noon, and sunlight shimmered like glass upon the water. Every morning as the sun peeked over the mountain ridge, Taro would see an old man sitting silently by the shore, holding a fishing net in his hands, eyes fixed on the distant sea. The old man was unlike the other fishermen. No shouting, no noise, never in a hurry. He sat as though he were part of the ocean itself, as if he wasn't just fishing, but in conversation with the water. Taro was drawn to that stillness. Many mornings he would sit quietly behind him, observing every small movement, the way the man lifted the rope, checked each knot, tilted his head to listen to the wind, took a long breath, and suddenly cast his net far out. Everything happened slowly, simply. But Taro couldn't understand. How did he know where the fish were? No map, no equipment, no visible signs on the water. Yet every day the old man cast his net in the same spot, as if there were an invisible mark on the sea that only he could see. One day, unable to contain his curiosity, Taro ran up and asked grandfather, "How do you know where to throw the net to catch fish? Do you have a secret A formula?" The old man stayed silent. He just kept casting his net as though the question had never existed. That day, the net came up full of fish, but the old man's face remained calm, unchanged. Taro waited for a smile, a nod of satisfaction, but nothing came. Another day, the net came up full of seaweed and broken shells. Yet his face was exactly the same, no regret, no sigh. Taro was puzzled. He had always thought that catching fish should make people happy. So why did this man's expression never change, whether the net was heavy or empty? That question echoed in his mind like waves breaking endlessly against the rocks. Something in him didn't understand, and that not understanding made him even more intent, as if he wanted to lift the whole sea to find the answer beneath. One afternoon, the sea was so calm, it seemed to be holding its breath. No wind, the surface like glass. The old man sat and cast his net as usual. But this time, after pulling it in, he turned toward Taro and asked Taro, "If I told you a funny story right now, would you laugh?" Taro looked surprised, then nodded. The old man continued, "If you were tired, would you still laugh?" Taro hesitated. "Probably, not easily." The old man nodded slowly as though confirming something he already knew. "Then tell me, where does your joy live?" he asked, his eyes gazing at the horizon. "In the story, or in your ability to laugh?" Taro was speechless. The question hit him like an unseen wave that stirred his heart. The old man spoke again softly, but every word seemed to settle deeply into the water. "I don't cast my net to catch fish. I cast my net to be with the sea. When fish come, I am grateful. When they don't, I am still grateful. Because the true reward is being here every day." Taro bowed his head. For the first time, he was silent, not because he didn't know what to say, but because he finally understood. He understood that not everything worth doing must lead to a result. Not every success is the reward, and not everything can or should be explained by logic. Just like meditation, sometimes we sit not to achieve, but to be present. Just like love, sometimes it doesn't need to be returned, only given. Just like life, where healing doesn't always come through words, but through quiet presence, like the old man by the water. And perhaps just like the sea, where everything comes and goes, those who stay long enough will understand being present is already enough. There is a paradox in the path of healing. It is precisely when we stop trying to heal that healing begins. In Buddhist teaching, acting without attachment to outcome is called non-seeking doing, without expecting results. Meditating not to reach a certain state. Breathing not to become calm, but simply because breathing is living. When you meditate while waiting for your mind to become quiet, you are not sitting to be present. You are sitting to achieve. And that very expectation creates another layer of tension, another obstacle. Mindfulness is not an effort to fix. Mindfulness is pausing and seeing that nothing needs to be fixed. You don't need to become okay. You only need to realize you are here. The Buddha said, "Happiness does not lie in desire, but in the absence of desire. Be present in every step, not to reach anywhere, but to truly walk." Taro understood this when he realized the old man wasn't catching fish. He was living with the sea. Each throw of the net was his way of merging with the moment. Tonight, as you lie down, you might still wonder, did I do it right? Have I done enough? Why is my mind still restless? If these questions arise, don't rush to chase them away. You don't have to fix yourself to find peace. Just stay. Just breathe in and out as it is. You don't need to clear your mind to sleep well. You only need to stop trying to clear it and let it settle naturally, like a lake that stills when no one stirs it. Why does this work better than all the complicated methods? Because when you sit, just to sit, breathe, just to breathe without trying to improve or achieve, your body begins to believe it is safe, no longer driven by the urge to change you. Return to your natural state where the mind rests not by force, but by ease. Neuroscience calls this the activation of the parasympathetic nervous system. When heart rate slows, breathing deepens, and the brain enters a restorative state. And you, without any extra effort, simply are. Because the deepest recovery begins the moment you stop trying to recover. Letting go isn't just about releasing painful memories. Letting go is also releasing the need to stop hurting. Try sitting quietly with no goal. Try breathing, not to find calm, but simply to breathe. Try looking at an emotion without trying to push it away. Just look. And then you will see, not everything unhealed is wrong. Not everything must disappear for peace to arise. Some sorrows only need to be seen, and they are already held. And some days only need to be lived, and they are already healed. There are moments in life that give you no time to prepare. No warning, no sign. Just one single moment, and everything suddenly disappears, the ground beneath your feet, the person you trusted, the thing you thought would last forever. Once someone said to a Zen master, "I'm not afraid of hardship. I'm afraid of losing direction. When panic comes, I no longer know who I am. What terrifies me isn't pain. It's when my mind has nothing to hold on to." Have you ever fallen into a moment like that? An unexpected accident, a cold message, a sudden job loss, a loved one gone, and then you feel yourself slipping off the very ground of your life. In that instant, it's not theory that saves us, but the ability to pause, to not be swept away by the storm of fear. Tonight's story is about a young woman named Aiko, who once fell off a cliff, both literally and metaphorically. But what stayed in my memory about her was not the fall, it was what she did in that very moment. That morning, Aiko and her friends went hiking. The sun had just risen beyond the far mountains, casting a soft light over moss-covered stones. The air was cool, fresh, and filled with the group's excitement. The trail wasn't too dangerous, but some narrow paths ran right along the edge of cliffs, where every step required steady focus. Aiko was walking last. She wasn't in a hurry. In her hand was a small notebook with worn edges, where she wrote down quiet reflections and fleeting thoughts she never spoke aloud. For Aiko, writing was like breathing a private way to slow down amid a rushing world. They had gone about halfway when a sound of pebbles sliding broke the calm. A loose rock rolled beneath Aiko's foot, throwing her off balance. Before she could think, her body lurched and she slipped off the narrow ledge. By pure instinct, her hand caught a thin branch jutting out from the rock wall. Her whole body hung suspended in midair. Below was a bottomless drop. Above, the trail was just beyond reach. The branch trembled, its shallow roots straining against the cliffside. Aiko gripped it tightly, her fingers bleeding. Her body tensed like a stretched string. Pebbles began to fall around her. The wind roared. Someone above shouted her name, but she didn't respond, not because she was too afraid, but because her mind was being pulled into a storm within. Thoughts flooded in like a river breaking its banks. Part of her screamed, "This is the end." But another part remembered her mother, a friend she hadn't yet apologized to, a poem left unfinished, an embrace left incomplete. And then, in the middle of that chaos, something extraordinary happened. Right in front of her, just within arm's reach, grew a tiny white flower out of the rock face, delicate yet upright, unshaken. It stood there, a small streak of light in the darkness, so small it could have been missed, yet beautiful enough to catch all her attention. Aiko stopped. Not her body, but her mind stopped. She no longer thought about whether the branch would break, or how far she might fall, or what she had left undone. She simply looked at the flower as if it were the only thing that existed in the world. And strangely, in that moment of greatest danger, her heart became calm. in a way that defied reason. No mantra, no miracle. Just one pure, silent pause, complete and whole. A few minutes later, a rope was lowered. They pulled her up to safety. Her friends sighed with relief, hugged her, and spoke of luck, good reflexes, and survival. But Aiko stayed quiet, because deep inside she knew what changed her was not the fact that she survived, but that brief instant when she truly lived, even when she thought she could not. Weeks later, when someone asked her about that day, Aiko simply smiled and said, "I wasn't at peace because I survived. I touched peace in the very moment. I thought it was over. When there was nothing left to do, nothing left to hold, life was no longer something to keep, it was simply presence." She said that since that day she no longer feared her chaotic thoughts, no longer tried to escape her worries or force herself into calm. She learned that peace isn't the absence of disturbance, but the ability to pause within it. And that little flower on the cliff, it wasn't just a flower. It was a moment, a lesson, a turning point beyond words, and whoever touches it will never be the same again. Perhaps for each of us, there will come a time when we face our own cliff in life, a place where there's nothing left to cling to, where everything seems about to break. And if that moment comes, may you remember this: don't rush to escape. Just look. Because perhaps somewhere nearby a flower is waiting for you to stop long enough to see it. Sometimes we don't need to be rescued. We just need to be present. Most people think Zen is about peaceful states, sitting still in a quiet garden, hearing birds breathing evenly. But the truth runs deeper. Zen is not about the situation. Zen is about how we meet the situation. If you can only meditate when your mind is calm, then meditation is nothing more than relaxation. True Zen is the ability to touch presence even in the most perilous moments. The Buddha once sat under a tree while Mara appeared in every form to threaten, tempt, and confuse him. But the Buddha simply touched the earth and said, "I am here." When you face fear, don't try to chase it away. Pause. Be present. You will see it's not fear that consumes you, but your running from it that exhausts you. You may never hang from a cliff like Aiko, but perhaps you've fallen into moments of losing control, a wave of anxiety in the night, a phone call with bad news, a sense of betrayal, emptiness, or breathless pain. In those moments, you don't need to overcome right away. Just look at the flower. That means find one small point of stillness, anything that helps you pause for 5 seconds. A breath, a beam of light through the curtain, a distant bird song, anything that doesn't belong to fear but to the present. A study from Japan's Institute of Brain Science found that just 8 to 12 seconds of pausing to notice your surroundings is enough to shift the brain from panic mode to presence. You don't have to solve everything at once. You just need to pause long enough not to drown. Meditation doesn't begin after you've overcome the storm. It can exist within the storm, even before you know if you'll make it through. The stillness in the middle of chaos isn't the end, it's the moment you stop being swept away. Don't wait for peace before you start observing. Practice observing even when peace is far away. Practice breathing even when your breath is shaky. Practice silence even amid noise. That is Zen in daily life. That is the flower on the cliff. There was a time when many people from very different walks of life came to ask the same question without ever agreeing to meet. What should I let go of, and how do I know what to keep and what to release? Some carried within them an old love long gone yet haunting every night. Some clung to fame achievements or the lingering regret of what once was. Some held on to an unspoken wound, too afraid to name it, too attached to let it go. They all asked, how can I let go when what I'm holding was once everything to me? And beneath that question lies something deeper. Can I live without the things that once defined who I am? If I let everything go, will I still be myself? Tonight's story is about a young woman named Naoko, who went up a mountain seeking spiritual learning, but discovered that her first lesson didn't come from scriptures. It came from the backpack she carried on her shoulders. Naoko began her journey on a cool autumn morning. The air carried the first hint of the season's chill. Pine trees whispered softly in the breeze. Dry leaves rustled underfoot, each one falling like an unspoken thought. On her back was a large, heavy backpack filled to the brim, leaving no room for anything else. But inside were not clothes or camping gear, they were memories. A worn-out teddy bear, the last gift from her late father. A faded photograph of the man she once loved completely. An old jacket from her student years filled with dreams. A stack of unsent letters. And a journal chronicling every event as proof that her life had once mattered. Naoko called them things I cannot leave behind, because she believed that memories were her roots. To abandon them would mean abandoning herself. At first, her steps were steady. She climbed with faith, believing that every burden was worth carrying. But as the sun rose higher, the trail grew steeper. Cold winds cut against her skin. Her shoulders began to ache. The backpack no longer felt like memory, it had become a mountain pressing down on her back. Each step was a gasp for breath. Each pause, a struggle. An old woodcutter passed by. He didn't speak at first. He looked at her pack, then said quietly, "Climbing the mountain isn't hard. What's hard is carrying a whole mountain on your back." Naoko gave a polite, slightly ironic smile. He doesn't understand, she thought. Everything in this backpack has a story. Each one is part of me. But soon her body began to betray her determination. She was forced to choose. Each stop became a moment of letting go. The old jacket folded neatly and left beside a mossy stone. The unfinished letters placed under a leaning tree, like a sentence that no longer needed to end. The photograph set atop a flat rock, like a small grave for what had already passed. The backpack grew lighter, but the summit was still far ahead. Only the teddy bear and the journal remained when she finally reached the last stretch, a steep cliff beneath the temple gate she had been walking toward. She couldn't climb further unless she left the backpack behind. Naoko sat down. Dusk had begun to fall. The last light of day streamed through the pines, bathing the path in soft golden hues. There was no one else around, only the forest and herself. For the first time, she stopped trying to move forward. She opened the backpack, took out the teddy bear, and held it close, as if she were embracing her childhood. After a long silence, she placed it gently on a stone beside a small bush. Then she opened the journal. On the last page, written long ago, were the words, "I carry Father with me." Naoko took out a pen. This time, her hand didn't tremble. She wrote beneath it, "Now I will carry Father in my heart, not in my backpack." She closed the book, set it next to the teddy bear, and stood up. Her back felt lighter than ever. Her steps no longer dragged. She was no longer bound to the past, no longer haunted by what was left unfinished. By the time she reached the temple gate, the sun was touching the horizon, but within her, a new day had just begun. Letting go is not an act of coldness. Letting go is an act of compassion toward yourself. We don't let go because something is unimportant. We let go because carrying it is hurting us. The Buddha taught, "Those who cling make suffering their companion. Those who release make freedom their home." We think we are made of memories, but the truth is, when we let go of the heaviest parts, the brightest parts finally emerge. You cannot take everything with you on the spiritual path, just as you cannot carry your entire past into tonight's sleep. Some things are meant to be honored and then left behind. So tonight, if you find yourself restless, haunted by a memory, a person, or a story that won't fade, try to look at the backpack you're carrying in your heart. What's inside it? Who is still there? How many years has it been since you last opened it? And most importantly, is there something you keep holding on to that no longer allows you to move forward? In psychology, this is known as emotional overpacking. Filling one experience with too many emotions so that every time you revisit it, it feels as heavy as the first journey. The solution isn't forgetting, it's redefining what you carry. You can hold someone in your heart without holding on to every image, object, or word. You can cherish a memory without letting it hurt you each night. Just set it down gently, and you'll remember you still have legs to walk. Letting go is the first condition for space. Without space, nothing new can enter. The same is true for the mind. When you seek stillness, ask yourself, have I made room for it? Like a room, if you want light to come in, you must open a window. If you want peace, you must clear away the old, the cluttered, the heavy. Try writing down 3 things you still carry, but no longer need. Then ask yourself, can I give thanks and leave them behind? When you let go, you don't lose, you simply become lighter. Someone once said to a Zen master, "I really want to understand the Dharma, but I've read all the books already. There doesn't seem to be anything new to learn." The master didn't answer right away. He simply asked, "Are you learning or are you repeating?" That question isn't only for students of Buddhism. It's for anyone who has ever felt stuck. When your mind is too full of knowledge, concepts, and opinions, you begin to believe that you understand. But that's exactly when you may fall into the most dangerous trap of the spiritual path, the trap of knowing. Like a cup already full of tea, no matter how pure the water, nothing more can be poured in. This is the story of Riku, a man who came to learn Zen not with an open heart, but with a mind already crowded with everything he thought he knew. Riku was a university lecturer. He had studied philosophy, then Western psychology, and finally turned to Eastern Zen. He was intelligent, sharp-minded, and eloquent, considered one of the most promising young professors at his university. From Plato to Nietzsche, from Freud to Jung, he could quote them as naturally as breathing. In discussions, his students often marveled not only at his vast knowledge, but at his ability to have an answer for everything. And yet, the more he knew, the emptier he felt. Though he could analyze every school of thought and explain the nature of consciousness, he could not sleep peacefully. Surrounded by books each night, he realized he was living in theory, but not truly touching life itself. One day, Riku heard about a Zen master named Kokoro who lived quietly in a small temple in the mountains. People said Kokoro didn't preach, didn't write, didn't argue. Those who came to him did only one thing: they stayed. And somehow, just being in his presence changed them. Riku decided to go. He believed he wasn't just coming to learn, but to prove that knowledge and experience could coexist. He packed lightly, but inside his backpack, along with a few clothes, was a thick notebook filled with notes, comparisons, and reflections on everything he had ever read or thought. When he arrived, light rain was falling. The small temple stood quietly among pine trees, fragrant smoke rising like a gentle breath. In the reception room sat a small, calm old man in brown robes, his eyes clear and still like a lake without ripples. "You are Riku?" the master asked. "Yes, master. I've come to study Zen." Before Kokoro could reply, Riku eagerly opened his notebook and began speaking, his voice bright and confident. "Master, I've read the Heart Sutra, the Middle Way, the Yogacara texts, and the works of Jung and Freud. Western psychology focuses on fragmentation, while Zen sees the whole. If we combine the two, I believe we could reach a more integrated understanding of consciousness. I've also completed a 10-day Vipassana retreat, then moved on to Zazen practice. I've realized that..." He talked and talked. His words flowed passionately. But while Riku spoke, Kokoro quietly poured tea. He placed a cup before Riku. The fragrance filled the air. Then, even as the cup neared full, the master continued pouring. Tea spilled over the rim down the saucer across the table. Startled, Riku cried out, "Master, your tea is overflowing." Kokoro looked up, smiling gently. "Yes," he said, "and when a cup is full, no matter how much more you pour, it will only spill over." The room fell silent. Outside, rain tapped softly under the eaves. Riku looked at the teacup, then at his own hands. "Master, you mean..." Kokoro set down the teapot and said softly, No one can learn something new when their mind is already filled with the old, and no one can see the truth if they only carry what they believe is right. Riku said nothing. In that moment, all the theories he had mastered about consciousness ego perception suddenly felt small and distant. He realized he hadn't been seeking truth at all. He had only been gathering words to defend what he already knew. The next day, Riku stayed at the temple. He didn't open his notebook again. Instead, he swept the yard, cooked rice, and listened to the sound of rain. Each morning, Kokoro poured tea as before. But this time, Riku said nothing. He simply watched the steam rise and felt its warmth in his palms. One morning, Kokoro asked gently, "How is the tea today?" Riku replied, "It's no longer hot, but I can still taste the fragrance." The master smiled and nodded. "Then you are beginning to taste." That single line opened something inside Riku. He understood that Zen isn't about understanding, it's about tasting, not about explaining, but being present. And the silence of Kokoro on that first day had been the first lesson, a lesson no book could ever teach. A cup can only receive the scent of tea when it is empty. In Zen, there is a phrase called beginner's mind. It is the mind that knows nothing, pure, open, not trying to prove or compare, only present and aware. The Buddha never asked us to be clever. He asked us to be awake, not to analyze, but to see clearly. The deepest knowing doesn't come from analysis, but from direct contact with reality, free of filters. To see in this way, the mind must be empty. When the mind is full of opinions, definitions, and conclusions, everything new becomes distorted to fit the old. Like a cup already filled with bitter wine, no matter how sweet the juice you pour in it, cannot taste sweet. Mindfulness isn't about how much you know. It's about your ability to pause and not instantly react through old patterns. Have you ever lain down to rest, but your mind keeps analyzing? Not just worrying, but dissecting your own feelings as if lecturing your inner self. You lie there, yet your mind asks, "Why do I feel like this? Is this childhood trauma? Am I meditating wrong? Have I not let go enough?" The mind keeps talking. Not because it's noisy, but because you're still trying to understand instead of being. Try sitting like someone who knows nothing. Try breathing as if it's your first breath. Watch your mind as if it's a child entering the room without judgment, without labels. Only when the mind stops being too clever can clarity begin to enter. You don't need to throw away your books, or stop thinking, or reject a lifetime of learning. Knowledge is beautiful. Reasoning is a gift. But even the finest crystal cup, if always full, cannot receive anything new. Sometimes you must set everything down and simply sit like an empty cup. No need to fill, no need to understand, just open. You can practice this each day with one small moment of empty mind. Sit down with no goal. If a thought arises, see it and let it pass. If you catch yourself analyzing, pause and gently remind yourself, this is not the time to understand. This is the time to be present. Just like listening to the rain outside your window, you don't need to know about air pressure, humidity, or water cycles. You just need to listen. And in that not needing to understand, you may finally understand most deeply. Because sometimes, touching reality doesn't come from thinking. It comes from being fully here, unfiltered by what you think you know. Riku had arrived with everything he believed was precious. But only when the tea overflowed did he realize fullness is not a strength. Sometimes it is the very obstacle. And one day, even what you think of as yourself may quietly dissolve, like the night leaving no trace behind. Full moon, gentle breeze. The trees do not move. Everything is silent, uncannily so. But what feels strangest of all is that the mind itself has nothing left to say. No questions, no answers, no seeking, no resistance, only a pure presence, empty yet complete. Then I remembered someone once asked me, is there a moment when we become nothing? No name, no role, no position, no memory. If so, do we still exist? It sounds like a philosophical question, but it's deeply human. Have you ever wondered if one day you were no longer called by your familiar name? If no one recognized your role? If you had no goal, no past to hold on to? Would you be afraid? Tonight's story is about a woman named Yuna who had practiced Zen for 20 years, gone through many stages of spiritual growth, realization, and titles others had given her. But one morning, she woke up and remembered nothing. And what happened after that is what truly matters. Yuna had always been a devoted student. She entered the monastery at 18 with a deep longing to be free from suffering and a sincere young heart. From her first steps on the worn stone path leading into the meditation hall, she lived with discipline, memorizing sutras, observing precepts, carefully working tirelessly. 5 years passed. She was no longer a novice. She began guiding new students, teaching them how to sit, breathe, and move mindfully in each small action. 10 years later, Yuna became a Dharma teacher at the monastery. She gave lectures, wrote books, edited training materials, and was invited to teach at Zen centers across the country. People called her Teacher Abbess, successor of the Silent Path lineage. Yuna had never asked for any title, but she had never set them down either. She still meditated daily, still lived simply, still ate vegetarian meals and chanted the sutras. But inside, something was quietly wearing thin, very slowly, very softly, like a candle burning near its wick unnoticed. Then one morning, no thunder, no event, just an ordinary day. Yuna woke up in her small wooden room, bathed in soft light from the early sun. The sound of temple bells drifted from afar. The faint scent of incense lingered in the air. And yet, something was different. She opened her eyes, looked at the ceiling, looked at her hand resting on her stomach, and realized she didn't know who she was. She couldn't remember her name, couldn't recall what day it was, didn't know which Zen lineage she belonged to, didn't know her age, didn't know why she was here or who she was supposed to be. Strangely, she did not panic, not a trace of fear, only emptiness. No reason to worry, no plans to make, no lecture schedule, no teaching to remember, no philosophy to hold on to, only breath, in, out. She sat there for a long time. It felt as though every concept she had ever known had dissolved like mist. What remained was life itself, bare, nameless. Yuna slowly stepped outside. The sky was clear. Birds sang as if for the very first time. Leaves rustled gently. Someone in the kitchen was boiling tea, its fragrance spreading softly, wordlessly. She no longer named anything. She didn't call them sparrows, didn't call it sunlight, didn't call it morning. She simply saw that everything was. She wasn't seeing to analyze, not to remember, just to see, to hear, to live. in a world without names. By noon, her memory began to return. She remembered being Yuna, remembered being a teacher, remembered the monastery her Dharma name her upcoming talk. But something within her had changed forever, as if an outer shell had cracked, as if the same person still existed, but was no longer carrying her old weight. Later, when someone asked what had changed her, Yuna said, "I spent 20 years trying to become a person of wisdom, but it was only in one morning of forgetting that I truly touched wisdom." She looked down at her teacup and added softly, "I realized wisdom isn't something you find. It's what reveals itself when there's no one left trying to understand. The story doesn't end in triumph. It ends in emptiness. But that emptiness is the beginning of everything profound. In Zen, there is something rarely spoken of, yet it is the deepest foundation of practice: not knowing. Not ignorance, but the pure clarity untainted by what we think we know. Not knowing is the first gaze of a child. It's when you no longer look at life through names, functions, or labels. The Buddha never taught us to become something. He taught see things as they are, without naming, without judgment, without framework, because it's only by removing all layers of labels, ideas, and interpretations that we return to truth. Ordinary knowing is accumulation. True knowing is release. When you lie down to sleep each night, what arises first? Your name, your roles, tasks undone, words unsaid, the identities you carry: parent, spouse, leader, caretaker. The mind cannot rest because it's guarding all those identities. Try just once before sleep to breathe and whisper inwardly, "I am nothing right now. No one needs me to be anyone. No one needs me to prove anything. I am simply a being lying down and breathing." You will feel light. Modern research has shown when the brain enters a non-identity state, no longer thinking of itself as a specific someone, the regions linked to anxiety, comparison, and pressure begin to relax. In other words, you don't need to know who you are to sleep peacefully. You only need to stop bringing someone into your sleep. A mind without a name is a free mind. Only when you stop calling everything by its old name can you see its freshness. Try living one day without defining who you are. Not a good person, not a practitioner, not someone healing, not anyone at all. Just live, breathe, listen. Look at a flower without calling it flower. Look at another person without assigning them a role. You'll be surprised how pure the world becomes again. Like a child seeing a raindrop for the first time, not knowing what rain is, only knowing that it's beautiful. Yuna forgot to truly remember, emptied to truly be full, lost her name to truly be present. And in the journey of awakening, what you've been waiting for may never arrive. Not because it doesn't exist, but because you've never knocked on the door. In the next story, you'll meet a man named Eiji, someone who stood before a door for many years, but never once stepped inside. Only when his long waiting had faded into quiet exhaustion did he finally realize the door had never been locked. The small temple sat hidden behind the slope of a mountain beneath towering pines. No signboard, no large bell, no echoing chants. Only a wooden door half closed, covered with the fine dust of time and scattered dry leaves. Locals called it the Nameless Temple. Many had gone there, few spoke about it. They only said, "If you are ready, you'll know why you came." Eiji was a young man from the village below. He first heard of the temple when he was 21 of the old Zen master who lived in seclusion, who did not lecture, write, or receive visitors in any ordinary way. But those who came were changed. Eiji listened, and curiosity stirred in him. He wasn't a devoted believer, but something in his heart was tired of relationships that went nowhere, tired of efforts that went unseen, tired of feeling that he belonged nowhere, not even within himself. The first time Eiji went to the temple was one autumn afternoon. Soft sunlight, a trail covered in leaves. The wooden door appeared not large, but something about it kept him from coming closer. He stood, looked, then turned back. He didn't know why, only that something inside him shrank like a child too shy to enter his first classroom. But he returned, again and again. Once he brought a letter 3 pages long filled with words about hope, about failures, about the loneliness of daily life. But standing before the door, he tore it to pieces. Another time he came before dawn, sat for hours on the stone step outside, arms around his knees, gazing at the dim outline of the wooden door in the mist. At one moment, he could have reached out and touched it. He didn't. Another day, he left a small wildflower on the doorstep, his silent greeting, and quietly walked away. Years passed. Seasons changed. Green leaves turned gold. Snow fell, then melted. And still, Eiji remained the gatekeeper as the villagers began to call him. No one mocked him. But no one understood why a man would visit the same place for 7 years and never cross its threshold. Then one winter morning, the wind rose early. Clouds hung low across the mountain peak. The air was sharp and cold, yet astonishingly clear. The last leaves were torn from their branches and spun along the path. Eiji came again, but this time he didn't stand at a distance. No hesitation, no plan, no need for courage. He simply walked forward, each step steady. He raised his hand ready to knock, but before his fingers touched the wood, the door opened from within. No creak, no sound, just a quiet opening, as if it had been waiting all along. Before him stood an old monk, small in stature, eyes bright and calm like the still surface of a lake. Eiji didn't need to speak. He didn't need to ask, "May I enter? Am I ready yet? What will you teach me?" The monk looked at him for a while, then said in a voice like wind through pine branches, "The door has been open for a long time. You just haven't stepped in." Eiji stood still, speechless. His eyes stung. He didn't know if from wind or tears. All the barriers he thought were outside had never existed. The hesitation, the shame, the feeling of not being worthy, all of them doors he himself had built. Only when he stopped analyzing, stopped preparing, stopped asking, "Am I enough?" Yet did the door, which had never been locked, finally reveal itself. He stepped inside, no invitation needed, no ceremony, no great moment, just a man finally returning to the place he had always feared to touch. And perhaps what opened beyond that door was not a new world, but the deepest part of himself that had never left, only waited for him to be still enough to return. In life, there is no shortage of doors, but what keeps us outside is rarely that they're locked. It's that our hearts have locked themselves first. The fear of rejection, the fear of not being enough, the fear of stepping in and not knowing what to do next. All these create the illusion of a door forever closed, Yet in truth, it's always slightly open, waiting only for our courage to take one more step. The Buddha taught, there is no path to enlightenment that does not pass through one's own self. Every teaching, every master, every method is merely a finger pointing at the moon. But if we never dare to step forward, the moon will always remain distant. Liberation doesn't come from being allowed to enter, but from realizing you have always been free to step in the moment you stop clinging to fear. Tonight, before you sleep, ask yourself, is there a door in my heart I've stood before for years, but never dared to enter? Maybe it's a conversation you keep avoiding, a relationship you've kept at a distance, a dream you've never begun, or the peace you keep telling yourself you don't deserve. Are you like AG, standing close but never touching the door? Remember, you don't need perfect conditions. You don't need to be flawless before you knock. You don't need explanations. Only one thing, the willingness to face yourself right now. Neuroscience shows that the brain's defense responses are often shaped by past fear memories, and most of the rejection we dread has never actually happened. It's only a projection triggered by the amygdala. In other words, what you fear is mostly an illusion of the mind. The door isn't locked. You just haven't opened your heart. Try writing down the name of a door you've stood before too long. Then write beneath it, why haven't I stepped in? Not to blame yourself, just to be honest. Then close your eyes and imagine the door is not locked. No one inside has refused you. No one is pushing you away. All that's needed is for you to step forward as you are. No defenses, no preparation, no excuses. Just yourself, present knocking. AG needed no further teaching. Only to hear at the right moment, the door has been open for a long time. You just haven't stepped in. And then he did. Not to find something inside, but to finally end the act of standing outside. One afternoon, someone asked a Zen master, why do I always choose to be around people who speak gently? Yet the more I stay with them, the less I seem to grow. The Zen master was silent for a while, then softly replied, because sometimes gentle words only keep you from falling apart. But it is the words that hurt with truth that truly awaken you. The person sat in silence for a long time. Indeed, it's not pain we fear, but being hurt by those we believe love us. Yet there exists a kind of compassion that is not coated in sweetness, a love that does not come to comfort, but to awaken. And in today's story, there is a woman named Katie, someone who seemed to have everything yet didn't realize she was standing on the edge of collapse, until a teacher dared to confront the weakest part of her. Kaide was admired by many. She appeared in the media with shining titles: international scholar, compassionate leader, symbol of the modern woman. She lectured at major conferences, wrote bestsellers, met world leaders, and received endless praise. Outwardly strong, graceful, convincing, but inside a vast, cold silence. It wasn't that Kaide had never practiced meditation. She had. She attended retreats, read Krishnamurti and Ajahn Chah, sat in silent temples in Japan, Thailand, and California. But every time she returned to her private room unseen by anyone, she would collapse. The roles of the wise one, the enlightened one, the compassionate one felt like a golden armor, beautiful, but false. She realized she was acting, playing the role of the strong, the kind, the awakened, and she was tired. One day she turned off her phone, her email, every notification. With only a small backpack, she left the city. She traveled to a remote mountain area with no signal, only pine forests, cold wind and mist that lingered all day. There were 2 small temples there, separated by a single grassy hill, each home to a different Zen master. One was named Jikan, a slender, quiet man with eyes like an autumn lake. He spoke little, but every word was like a warm cloth in winter. The other was Genyo, tall, stern eyes, sharp as a blade cutting straight through you. He didn't soften, didn't disguise, didn't comfort. Kaide met both. Jikan welcomed her with hot tea and silence. He didn't ask much, only smiled as she explained why she came. His voice was deep, each word falling softly like pine dust. Genyo, on the other hand, looked at her once and said bluntly, "Did you come here to learn Zen, or to collect another title?" Kaide froze. The question struck like cold water to the face. She was used to being respected, heard praised as highly conscious. Never before had someone openly questioned her motives so directly. She felt angry, and yet her heart pounded. That day, she left Genyo's temple with a mechanical bow and spent the night restless. 3 days later, she returned, not to Jikan, but to Genyo's door. "I want to learn," she said, "even if you might hurt me." Genyo said nothing. He simply stepped aside, opened the wooden door, and her journey began. During the months that followed, Kaide experienced what no previous retreat had given her. No one called her by title. No one mentioned her career or biography. Here she was, a blank page. She swept leaves, carried water, cooked meals, washed dishes, and she was constantly asked questions she could not hide from. Did you just help that person out of compassion, or to be seen as compassionate? Did you cry because you're truly in pain, or because your image of strength just broke? Did you stay silent because you're mindful, or because you're avoiding the truth? Each question cut straight into the roots of her ego. Kaide, once brilliant with words, found herself speechless. She was being stripped layer by layer, not by insult, but by a truth so raw it was uncomfortable. She once thought she was brave, but now realized it takes real courage to let others see your real self. One morning, while cleaning the meditation hall, Kaide bent down and saw her reflection on the polished wooden floor. Sunlight slanted through the window, casting her unpainted face upon the surface. No title, no audience, no lecture to finish. And she smiled, not because she was enlightened, but because for the first time, she didn't need to be anyone. And that felt light. The one who loves you is not always the one who is gentle, and the one who hurts you is not necessarily your enemy. Sometimes the clearest mirror comes from those who refuse to flatter you. Compassion is not always tender. True compassion is light shining directly into darkness, even when you're not ready to see it. The Buddha once said, "The greatest enemy of practice is self-deception, and the greatest teacher is not the one who comforts you, but the one who makes you honest." In Zen, there is a term, the mirror without dust. A true teacher gives you nothing new, only helps you see yourself clearly. Sometimes that mirror burns your eyes, but if no one dares to hold it up, how will you see the dust on your face? Tonight, before you sleep, ask yourself, who dares to tell me the truth? Am I surrounding myself with those who make me comfortable or those who help me be honest? You may have studied, much understood deeply, But if no one has ever pointed out the part you refuse to see, you have not truly begun. Meditation is not to lull the mind into sleep. It is to turn on the light in the room you've long lived dimly in. In life, be grateful to those who dare to hurt you, not to wound, but to help you see yourself clearly. Don't choose the teacher who makes you comfortable. Choose the one who makes you truthful. Don't choose the path that avoids pain. Choose the path that cuts through illusion. Each night before sleep, you might ask, did I live truthfully today? Is there something I'm still holding on to out of fear of losing my image? Then breathe. Let go. Don't scold yourself. Just see. And sleep will come like a homecoming without the need to hide. Someone once asked a Zen master, do I need to travel all the way to Tibet, India, or some distant mountain to find the path of liberation? The master smiled, looked at him for a long time and said, you don't need to go anywhere if you still haven't dared to step out of the place you're hiding. We often go to sacred places believing something miraculous awaits us there. But in most cases, the miracle is not in the temple, not in the statue, not in a teacher. It begins only when you have the courage to step out of where you hide. Sometimes that hiding place isn't a room, but a habit, a repetitive cycle, a false sense of safety, a shell made of excuses. And if you haven't stepped out, then no place, no matter how sacred, can do anything for you. Today's story is about a woman named Mayu who lived right next to a temple very close, but for many years never once stepped inside. Her small wooden house rested along the hillside just a few hundred steps from the temple gate. It was simple, low-roofed with old tiles marked by time. Nothing special. No one remembered when she had moved there, but everyone in the area knew one thing every morning before the sun rose fully. 3 soft, clear chimes of a bronze bell rang out from her home light as mist. Mayu always woke early. She boiled water, made tea, folded her blanket, prepared a simple breakfast for one. Then she stepped out to the porch, holding a small bell. No prayer, no ritual. She simply faced the temple and rang the bell 3 times in silence. Then she went back inside, closed the door, and the rest of the day passed quietly. No one knew who she was. No one knew why she did it. Mayu had never entered the temple, nor spoken to any of the monks who lived there. She was like a quiet shadow, never crossing paths, never intruding, yet unmistakably present a silent rhythm within the life of the temple. Some young monks began to notice. One brought her tea. She accepted it with a bow, but did not keep it. Another invited her to the Buddha's birthday celebration. She thanked him softly, then declined. Stories of the woman who rings the bell spread through the valley, becoming a familiar mystery no one tried to solve. The abbot, an old Zen master who had spent decades in that forest monastery, never spoke of her. But each morning when the bell sounded, he sat still in the meditation hall, as if listening to something deeper than sound itself. No praise, no inquiry, only silent understanding between 2 minds that had never met. Then one day the bell did not ring. That morning was gray. Thick clouds covered the mountains. The wind carried cold, damp air. The Zen master put on his robe and slowly walked down the slope along the gravel path leading to Mayu's house. The door was slightly open, Silence. He didn't knock. He simply stood outside and said in a deep, warm voice, "Mayu." Today the bell did not call. From inside came her faint, hoarse reply as if she had just awoken from a long sleep. "I no longer know who I'm calling." There was a long pause. Then the master said softly, his voice like breath itself, "The bell doesn't call the Buddha. The bell calls you out of hiding." The door opened. No explanation, no apology, only a face no longer hiding, a gaze no longer avoiding. Later, when someone asked her about it, she smiled gently and said, "I used to think I rang the bell to reach the Buddha. But really, I was ringing it to hold on to the part of me that was hurt." Each sound was a reminder that I still existed. But when I no longer needed that reminder, I was finally ready to step out. That short story lingered long in the hearts of those who heard it, not because of who Mayu was, but because in each of us there is a hiding place, a nameless room where we lock ourselves in with everything we have not yet released. And perhaps only when we stop knocking from afar, stop waiting to be called by name, do we finally hear what life has always whispered. You don't need to awaken anyone. You only need to awaken yourself. Sometimes what we've been doing for years isn't spiritual practice, it's hiding behind its form. Ringing a bell may seem sacred, but if it replaces the courage to step out, it becomes a mask. Liberation isn't about going anywhere. Liberation is deciding to stop avoiding yourself. The Buddha isn't where the sound of the bell reaches. The Buddha is where you sit with your own mind and body with no intermediaries. Modern psychology calls this avoidant spirituality when one uses spiritual routines as a way to delay facing the inner truth. No meditation hall can replace a single honest step. No Dharma talk can replace a brave nod. No bell can replace you, the one who dares to open the door. Are you ringing a bell of your own each day? Not with your hand, but through habit. A phrase you repeat, an excuse you cling to, a rhythm of living that keeps you from moving on. Tonight, before you sleep, ask yourself, am I truly living, or just keeping a steady rhythm so I don't have to step out of what's old? Turn off every sound. Listen. No bell rings. No one reminds you to meditate. No one waits for you to say something wise. And if in that silence you feel afraid, perhaps you are finally standing close to the real door. Embrace that trembling. It's the sign that you've begun to leave your hiding place. You don't need to ring a bell to call the Buddha. The Buddha is already here. You only need to show up fully without hiding behind any spiritual image. If there's a pain you haven't faced, look at it. If there's a dream you haven't lived, step toward it. If there's something sacred nearby you've never touched, open the door. No one forbids you. No one judges you. Only you have kept yourself in the background. And the bell, it never called anyone. It only signaled that it's time to leave the old place. Mayu didn't need another teaching. She only needed to hear one sentence. The bell doesn't call the Buddha. The bell calls you out of hiding. And she stepped out. Not to the temple, not to bow. Simply out of her own darkness. Many people have traveled to countless places, joined every kind of spiritual retreat, read hundreds of books, and yet, when they finally sit down, they whisper one small sentence. I still don't know which path is truly mine. The Zen master asked gently, "Could it be that you haven't truly walked, but only been looking for the path?" We grow up in a world that loves maps. Maps of career, maps of love, maps of spiritual progress, maps of success. But sometimes a sudden storm comes and all those lines disappear. Then the question is no longer, where should I go? But rather, am I truly walking here in this present moment? Today's story is about Ichiro, a man who had a map in his hands, a clear plan for everything, yet got lost in the desert. And it was that very lostness that revealed the path no map could ever show. Ichiro was the kind of person who let nothing happen by chance. From short trips to life-changing events, he planned every detail. In his study were notebooks filled with meticulous notes, maps marked in colored layers, timelines pinned on the wall like the strategies of a general before battle. When he heard of a monastery hidden deep beyond the desert, a place said to be the gateway to the inner mind, Ichiro knew he had to go. But he didn't go as a pilgrim. He went as an architect of his own awakening. He spent months researching routes, collecting notes from travelers, analyzing the harsh weather, even simulating worst-case scenarios. A detailed map, the best compass, backup GPS, everything perfectly prepared. He set out convinced that intellect and preparation were the twin torches that could light any darkness. But the desert was unlike anywhere else. The first 3 days went smoothly on time, on schedule, exactly as planned. The wind blew, the sand shifted, but all within expectation. On the 4th morning, the air grew strangely still. No warning. Then suddenly a sandstorm struck. No shelter, no time. Wind howled. Sand tore against his face like tiny blades. The sky turned opaque yellow. No roads, no markers. The dunes swallowed everything, even the horizon. Ichiro wrapped his scarf, crouched low, becoming a living stone against the storm. Sweat, dust, fear blending as one. When the storm finally passed, the sunlight returned, but nothing looked the same. He stood, opened his map, and froze. All his notes, marked dunes, reference points gone. The desert had redrawn itself like a blank canvas. The sand dunes had shifted, his footprints had vanished. He tried walking in the direction he thought was right. Ended up back where he started. Tried again, same result. Everything lost its meaning. And for the first time, Ichiro realized he was no longer in control. He sat down exhausted and thirsty, his mind tangled in confusion and quiet fear. Not fear of dying, but fear of having nothing left to trust in, not even his once confident intellect. Then came the sound of slow steps. A nomad appeared leading a camel. Calm, unhurried. An old man with sun-darkened skin and eyes deep and kind. He sat beside Ichiro without a word, poured water from a leather pouch, and handed it to him. Ichiro drank greedily, then asked, voice trembling, "Do you have a map?" The nomad smiled a smile as light as the wind across the settling sand. A map. The desert changes its shape every day. I've never had one. Ichiro stared stunned. That went against everything he believed. Then, how do you know where to go? The old man didn't answer right away. He pointed to the footprints in the sand, then to his chest, then down to his feet. There is no path, only the step you are taking now. Ichiro fell silent. The words sounded Zen-like, almost vague. But this time he didn't argue. He was too tired to resist with logic. And in that moment, for the first time, he understood. Not every journey has a route. Not every search has a direction. And sometimes what makes us lost is not the absence of a map, but the certainty of what we think we already know. That day, Ichiro stopped following the old plan. He put away his map, turned off his devices, and began to walk, not to find the monastery anymore, but to meet himself again step by step in a desert, with no map, no certainty, but more real than any road he'd ever known. In life, there are moments when you feel directionless. Nothing seems clear. All reference points vanish. But it's in that very moment that you begin to see life as it truly is. The Dharma is not a pre-drawn map. It is light revealing one step at a time. Zen doesn't teach us where to go. It teaches us to see clearly where our foot is landing right now. The Buddha taught, "The path lies beneath the feet of the traveler. No one can walk it for you. The mind always wants a plan. But awareness needs no plan, only presence. When you lie awake at night wondering, what am I doing? Where am I going? Does any of this mean anything? Try stopping the search for answers. Instead, ask gently, am I present in this breath right now? Your map might be torn apart by loss, by failure, by an ending no one prepared you for. But you don't need a map to keep walking. Just look down at your feet and take one mindful step. You don't need to understand the whole path. You only need to walk honestly, one step at a time. If you feel lost, stop searching. Breathe. Feel the ground beneath you. Look at the sky and know each true step will create its own path. Don't wait for clarity. Walk even when you don't know where it leads, because sometimes that very not knowing is where truth begins. Zen is a path without a map. Every day the desert shifts again. But it's all right. If you still have breath, if you still have feet, if you still have awareness in each step, you are not lost. You are alive. Ichiro never found the path because every road had been erased by the wind. But in that emptiness, he discovered something greater than any map, the full presence within each step. There are seasons when you work hard to plant water and care patiently, yet nothing grows. No green sprout, no sign of life. And then you begin to wonder, what am I doing wrong? Or maybe, nothing is happening at all. That question is familiar, especially when you're on an inner path of transformation. When you meditate regularly, live kindly, let go of anger and ego, bit by bit. Yet nothing on the outside seems to change. No recognition, no blooming. And slowly, you begin to want to give up. But there is something every bamboo grower knows well. Bamboo doesn't sprout right away. Yet in the silent darkness underground, it is already growing deep roots. Today's story is about a woman named Rin, who cared for a patch of bamboo for 4 years without seeing a single leaf. And just when she was ready to give up, something unexpected happened. Rin lived in a small wooden house by the forest where morning sunlight filtered through the leaves and birdsong echoed like a wordless sutra. Her days passed slowly, quietly. She brewed tea, swept the yard, folded away the world's busyness like folding a small piece of paper, and tucked it into the drawer of her simple life. In front of her house was a small patch of soil, not big enough for a large garden, but enough to plant something meaningful. Years ago on a pilgrimage, an old nun had given Rin a small packet of rare bamboo seeds. This kind of bamboo, the nun said, does not grow like other plants. It's not quick, not showy, but if cared for with patience, it becomes a great teacher. Rin brought the seeds home as if carrying a seed of her own heart. She chose the best corner of soil, removed small stones one by one, spread good compost watered carefully, and planted the seeds with reverence. The first season passed. Nothing appeared. She wasn't surprised, partly because the old nun had warned her, and partly because patience was already in her nature. Every day she still watered, pulled weeds, and recited sutras beside that patch of earth, as if tending to a soul in deep sleep. The second year came. The soil remained brown and silent as if untouched. She began to wonder, maybe I planted wrong. Maybe the seeds are dead. Maybe this land isn't right for them. Still, her hands did not stop watering. Her feet still walked there every morning, like an unspoken vow that needed no witness. The third year arrived. The wind still blew, the rain still came, but the ground remained bare. Not a single sprout emerged to assure her she wasn't alone in waiting. One day, Rin went to a nearby temple. She knelt before the Zen master and asked softly, "Have I done something wrong? Master, the earth has stayed silent for 3 years." The master looked at her, not smiling, not stern, and replied in a calm, deep voice, "You haven't done wrong, but some things must grow in hiding. Sometimes silence itself is a profound form of growth." Rin bowed her head. The answer didn't clear her doubts, but it also didn't let her lose hope. The fourth year began with a quiet autumn. One cool morning, Rin walked to the garden with a hoe in her hand. She looked at the same old patch of earth, showing no sign of life, and thought simply, perhaps it's time to plant something easier to grow. Just as she pressed the blade into the soil, a familiar voice came from behind. "Are you about to give up?" She turned. It was the master standing quietly by the path, his yellow robe like a falling leaf. 4 years, she said. Not one leaf, not one sign of life. I've done everything I could. The master stepped closer, looked down at the soil, and said slowly, his voice steady as a distant temple bell, "There is a kind of bamboo that spends the first 3 or 4 years growing roots underground. All its life force moves downward, not upward, because it must anchor itself deep. When it finally rises, it soars skyward in a single season. If you stop now, it will never rise at all." Rin stood still. His words fell on her like dew upon a dry leaf light, but enough to make the whole branch tremble. She looked again at the patch of soil. Still nothing visible. But this time, she no longer looked with her eyes. She looked with faith newly awakened. She set the hoe down, knelt, and quietly watered as always. No wish for sprouts, no demand for leaves, no need for proof. She simply tended it out of gratitude for being allowed to care for what she could not yet see. 3 months later, on a cold winter morning, when dew still blanketed the grass, she stepped outside as usual, and there it was. From the moist soil, a single tender green shoot had emerged. So small you might miss it if you didn't bend close. But to her, it was the most beautiful beginning. And just as the master had said, within 1 season, that sprout became a strong bamboo grove, tall, vibrant, alive. Each bamboo joint reminded her, not everything that is slow is hopeless. Not every silence is wasted. Some things must grow deep before they can rise high. In Zen, there is a stage called silent nourishment growth that happens in stillness. No visible change, no emotional high, no dramatic insight. Yet beneath it all, the mind is reorganizing. Old beliefs are loosening. Old wounds are healing quietly. If you leave in the middle of that process, you'll never see what was meant to bloom. Like the bamboo, you must have enough faith to keep watering, even when you see nothing. The Buddha taught mindfulness is not to change everything instantly, but to nurture a deeper seeing beyond the impatience of the ego. Many people begin to meditate, to let go, to live mindfully for weeks, months, then lose heart. Why? Because they expect results right away. But think of sleep. There are nights when you lie awake believing you'll never rest, and yet by morning you've passed through a deep sleep without knowing when it came. The mind is the same. It needs space. It needs waiting. It needs your non-interference. Not seeing doesn't mean nothing is happening. The seed is still breaking its shell. What are you nurturing in your life right now? A new habit, a kind intention, a forgiveness, a wounded faith. Keep going. Not because you're sure of results, but because watering each day is an act of sincerity. And when the time is right, the bamboo will grow not because you forced it, but because you never abandoned it. True growth always happens beneath the quiet soil. Rin didn't need to do more, only not give up. And through that patience, what once seemed hopeless blossomed into a lesson on endurance and faith. And just like that, in the next story, you will meet Daiki, a young man with great dreams who spent his life flying high without realizing he was still inside an invisible cage. Until one day, his wings touched the edges of his limits, and he had to ask himself, "What is freedom if I never knew I was caged?" Daiki was a young painter full of promise. His works had been exhibited in major galleries, and famous collectors came to purchase them even before the paint had dried. Critics praised him as the artist who paints stillness in motion, the new breath of contemporary Japanese art. But all of that, the fame, the expectations, the endless praise, slowly began to suffocate him. Each morning, Daiki would wake up, stare at the ceiling of his Tokyo apartment, and whisper to himself, "Why am I painting?" He still sat before his canvas, arranged his colors, adjusted the light. But every time he picked up the brush, his hand froze. The fire that once burned brightly within him had dimmed into a faint wisp of smoke. Eventually, Daiki decided to leave the city. He sold many of his paintings and moved to a small house near the forest where there were only bird streams and the wind brushing through pine leaves. He told his friends he wanted to find freedom again, but freedom did not come. On his first day in the forest, he sat before the easel for hours and couldn't paint a single stroke. On the second day, he rearranged his brushes, cleaned his colors, still nothing. On the third day, he walked deep into the woods, hoping nature would awaken inspiration. But when he returned, the blank canvas stared back at him, a mirror reflecting his own inner stagnation. He realized that even with no audience, no schedule, no pressure, he still could not touch the freedom he believed had been stolen by the outside world. That night, as the forest wind passed through his window, he dreamt. In the dream, he was a bird, strong wings, wide sky ahead. He flapped once, twice, 3 times, but his body did not lift. Startled, he turned his head and saw behind him faint bars curving, shimmering in the moonlight. No one had trapped him. Yet he was inside a cage, a real one. He tried again, wings beating harder, sand flying, sweat pouring, but he could not rise. His heart pounded violently. Then he woke up, his forehead drenched with sweat, breath quick, heart still racing as if the dream had not ended. He sat up in the dark and whispered almost like a sigh, "That cage. I built it myself." For the first time in years, something within him cracked, but it felt light. The next morning, Daiki didn't touch his brushes. Instead, he took out paper and a pen, sat down and began to write. No editing, no searching for beautiful words, no analysis. He just wrote, releasing layer after layer of heaviness. I'm afraid of being judged. I'm afraid of painting something no one understands. I'm afraid I'm no longer special. The first page filled, then another, then another. The handwriting was shaky, uneven, but true. When he finally stopped, he noticed his hands trembling, not from exhaustion, but from relief. It felt as though a stone that had pressed against his chest for years had just been lifted. That evening, Daiki looked again at the blank canvas. No plan, no goal, no thought of good or bad. He simply wanted to paint. The brush touched the color touched the canvas, and flow returned, natural like breathing. When the painting was finished, he gazed at it for a long time, a bird standing inside a cage, wings folded, but the cage door had long been open. Behind the bird, there was no jailer, only the sky. And perhaps that painting marked his true return, not to art, but to his own freedom. Freedom, he realized, does not come from breaking the bars. It begins when you recognize that you are the one holding the key. So many people believe they are trapped by circumstances. But when we look closely, we see that most of the deepest chains are self-made. We lock ourselves in with expectations others never asked of us. Rigid definitions of success. The fear of being wrong, of losing face, of being hurt. The quiet voices inside that whisper, I can't. I'm not good enough. Someone like me could never. The Buddha taught beings are bound not by chains of iron, but by the thoughts they cling to. Only when we look directly at those soft ropes with mindfulness and compassion can we begin to unlock them. Tonight, before you fall asleep, ask yourself softly, am I living inside a cage? If so, who is holding the key? You might feel stuck in work that doesn't move forward, in relationships that don't grow, in emotions you can't explain. But try writing as Daiki did. Write everything you fear. Write without editing. Write as if no one will ever read it. You may be surprised to find that the cage of your mind becomes visible, and its door was never really locked. Freedom doesn't come from destroying everything. Freedom begins the moment you see what's holding you. Freedom isn't about flying higher. It's about no longer tying your own wings. If you're feeling exhausted, perhaps it's not because you've flown too much, but because you've been struggling inside a cage you built yourself. Look again with kindness. No blame, no judgment. Just look and open the door. Daiki once thought someone else had locked him in, but in the end he realized the key had always been in his own hand. And when he finally faced it without running away, his once weary wings carried him out of the invisible cage. On the spiritual path, there is a profound question many have asked. How can I forgive someone who hurt me when my heart is still full of anger? It's not an easy question. because there are wounds that don't bleed but ache quietly inside the heart. There are words that were never shouted yet, echo again and again, every time you close your eyes. And while we may think that holding on to anger is a way to hold on to justice, in truth, anger slowly erodes the compassion within us. Today's story is about Hannah, a young woman who chose not to retaliate when she was insulted. Instead, she repaired the roof of the very person who had humiliated her. And in that act, something beautiful bloomed, not in the other person, but in her own heart. Hannah lived in a small village near a temple. Every Sunday morning, she prepared a pot of warm tea and brought it to the monks. No one asked her to. No one reminded her. But Hannah did it faithfully as a quiet promise to herself. She didn't just bring tea, she helped in the temple garden, carried water, swept leaves. In the afternoons, she taught writing to the orphans in the village, guiding their hands with a voice as gentle as wind. When asked why she did all that, Hannah would simply smile and say, "Because it brings peace to my heart." One morning, after tending the temple garden, Hannah was carrying 2 large buckets of water back to the village. As she passed a narrow alley, she heard loud arguing coming from a wooden house. It was the home of Mrs. Fumi, a woman known throughout the village for her sharp tongue and unpredictable temper. People avoided her as one might avoid a sudden storm. Just as Hannah passed by, the door flew open. Mrs. Fumi, her face red with anger, saw Hannah and for no clear reason lashed out at her. "Ah, it's you, the fake kind one. Bringing tea to the temple just to get praise, isn't that right? Girls like you, your hearts are darker than you look." Her words struck like cold stones. The passers-by froze. The air thickened for a moment. Hannah stood still, hands holding the water pole. She didn't argue. She didn't lower her head. She simply nodded politely to Mrs. Fumi and walked away, as if the harsh words had passed right through her. That night, a heavy rainstorm came. Wind howled through the cracks of the roof. Trees in the yard snapped and fell. The sky seemed to rage alongside human hearts. The next morning, while the ground was still wet and the clouds still gray, Hannah woke earlier than usual. She carried a bamboo ladder, some old roof tiles she had received from the temple, a sturdy rope, and her own capable hands used to climbing, fixing, caring. Without a word, she went to Mrs. Fumi's house. The back roof had been torn apart by the storm. Tiles had fallen across the yard. A corner of the house was exposed, straw soaked with rain. Hannah set up the ladder and climbed up carefully. One tile at a time, she began to repair the broken sections. Raindrops still clung to the cold wooden surface. The sound of footsteps on the roof woke Mrs. Fumi. She stepped outside and looked up to see the girl she had insulted the day before fixing her roof. She froze. Words failed her. The chill she felt wasn't from the night's rain, but from the wave of shame rising within her. "Why? Why are you helping me?" she stammered. Hannah continued her work, smiling softly as she replied, "Because your roof is leaking. But I insulted you. I don't deserve this." Hannah paused for a moment, looked down her eyes, calm and kind. Whoever can stay peaceful without revenge is planting the deepest seed of blessing. It wasn't a lofty teaching nor a quote from a book. It was a simple truth she had learned through years of choosing not to hate, not to retaliate. Mrs. Fumi stood motionless. For the first time in many years, she had no defense, no bitterness left to speak. In the pale morning light, her eyes shimmered as if something within them had just been cleansed. No one knew exactly what changed after that day. But over time, Mrs. Fumi began to bring tea to the temple too. Not often, but regularly. Those who once heard her scold others now began to hear her ask how they were doing. Few knew the story of the roof, but everyone could feel that something inside her had softened, as if after a great rain the soil of her heart had become ready for new seeds to grow. And if someone were to ask, did Hana do it to prove her compassion, the answer would be much simpler. She just lived the way a peaceful soul chooses to live, not to be praised, not to be forgiven, but because it made her own heart lighter. And sometimes, it's precisely that silent, non-reactive kindness that becomes the greatest lesson of all. In Buddhism, forgiveness is not about forgiving others. It's about forgiving yourself for carrying the heavy burden of resentment. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean excusing what was wrong. It means understanding the deeper cause of harmful actions and letting them go from your heart. Forgiveness is a form of mature compassion. It is not weakness. It requires great strength because it means rising above the wounded ego and resisting the instinct to strike back. The Buddha taught hatred is never ended by hatred. Only by compassion is hatred healed. Those who can forgive are the ones who end the chain of suffering. Have you ever gone to bed with an unresolved story in your heart? A hurtful word and action never apologized for a look that made you doubt yourself for years. Those are the broken tiles in your heart. You don't have to forgive right away, but perhaps you can start by not feeding the anger anymore. Forgiveness doesn't have to be grand. Sometimes it's as simple as not speaking back, not replaying the scene, not adding more fuel. Then you'll notice the rain of life no longer leaks through your heart. You cannot control how others treat you, but you can choose how you respond. You can pick up the tile within your heart or throw it away. You can repair the roof of peace or let it keep leaking every night. Forgiveness doesn't change the past, but it changes the direction of the future. And in each act of compassion, you are healing yourself. Hana didn't need proof. She didn't need an apology. Because the moment she repaired the broken roof, she was also mending the roof of her own heart. And just like sunlight finding its way through old tiles, forgiveness always finds its way into the human heart, even through the smallest act of kindness. Sometimes in life, it's not that we lack light, it's that there is too much artificial light, and it blinds us from seeing what is truly bright. The same is true within the mind. There are moments when you search for truth, when you seek an answer to something deep inside, and the harder you search, the more confused you become. You read more books, you listen to more teachings, you light more lamps. But the more you light, the more the water ripples. You can't see the truth because you are standing in the middle of countless lamps you yourself have lit. So what should you do? Turn some of them off. Be still. Return to simplicity. Today's story is about Sutta, a young man who longed to find absolute truth in his spiritual practice. But the more impatient he became, the further he strayed from what was already before his eyes. Sutta lived alone in a small thatched hut at the edge of a forest beside a crystal-clear stream. No electricity, no noise, nothing but the sound of water flowing and the wind slipping through pine needles. It was the place he had chosen after leaving the city years ago, with one single wish to find stillness. Every evening after finishing his simple meal, Sutta went to the stream. He sat on a familiar flat stone, hands resting together on his knees, eyes turned toward the surface of the water. There, the image of the moon always appeared round, bright, gentle, like a friend who was never absent. During those first nights, Sutta felt his heart being cleansed. The moonlight on the calm water looked like a perfect mirror. Each slow breath seemed to merge with that light. He began to believe that if he simply sat still and watched the moon reflected in the stream, his mind would gradually become as clear as the water itself. But lately, something had changed. The moon was no longer clear. Some nights, its reflection blurred, distorted. Sometimes it trembled as though the water refused to be still. Worse yet, some nights it disappeared completely. Only the shadows of trees flickered and the surface shimmered with darkness. Sutta grew uneasy. Each time the moon vanished, his mind wavered. Is it me? Is my heart not calm enough? He tried harder to sit straighter, breathe longer, move less, all to make the water stay still. But the result was the same. The moon was gone, the reflection broken, and his mind exhausted. One night, Sutta decided to try something new. Maybe the light isn't bright enough, he thought. If I make it brighter, I'll see the moon clearly. So he brought out a large oil lamp, the same one he used to fix the roof of his hut at night. The flame burned brilliantly. Its light spread across the forest edge, shining on the stream like daylight. But strangely, the moon's reflection vanished completely. No image, no glow, only the dazzling yellow light of the lamp glaring on the water. The ripples, once friends of the moonlight, now reflected only the lamp's fire. The moon, though still high in the sky, had no place to appear. Sutta was shocked. He turned the lamp off. The moon returned. He lit it again. The moon disappeared. Off, on, off, on. Every time the lamp shone, the moon was gone. That night he couldn't sleep. The next morning before dawn, Sutta quietly walked down to the temple where an old Zen master lived, whom he sometimes visited, but had never asked a deep question. This time, he came with one. "Master," he said softly, "last night I lit a bright lamp so I could see the moon clearly in the stream, but the moon disappeared. I saw only the lamp and the ripples. I thought I wasn't calm enough, so I tried to make the light stronger, but the more I lit, the less I saw." The master looked at him quietly. He asked nothing more. He slowly poured tea, then finally said, "The moon is still there. It has always been there. But your lamp's light disturbed the water and your eyes became blinded." He paused, letting Sutta absorb the words. Then he placed a gentle hand on the young man's shoulder and smiled. There are things in life that don't need more. They just need less. Sutta looked at him, then bowed deeply. The answer was simple, yet it loosened a knot that had long been tightening in his chest. That afternoon, he returned to his hut, placed the lamp in a corner, and never brought it to the stream again. That evening, he sat once more on the familiar stone under the tender darkness of night. He didn't try to see the moon. He didn't wait for anything to appear. He didn't wish for anything to return. And in that moment when he stopped seeking the moon, quietly came back whole and clear, as if it had never been gone. In Zen, there is a vital principle. Add nothing, remove nothing. See things as they are. Truth, like the moon, is always present. But when the mind is crowded with desires, thoughts, and effort, its water is no longer still enough to reflect. The harder we try to see, the more disturbance we create. The Buddha taught, the one who truly sees the Dharma is not the one who gains more knowledge, but the one who stops long enough to see clearly as it is. Clarity doesn't come from doing more. It comes from being still. Before you sleep, have you ever felt your mind spinning, thinking of what just happened, what's coming next, what you should have said or done, or even of things that don't exist? The mind becomes a stream lit by hundreds of lamps of thought, and you ask, why can't I find peace? The answer lies in the very lights you keep turning on. Try turning them off one by one. Turn off your phone 30 minutes earlier. Turn off the habit of reading just one more thing. Turn off the need to finish everything in your head. You don't need more to see the moon. You just need less, so the water can become clear again. We live in an age of too many choices, too much information, too much light. And because of that excess, we've lost our ability to reflect truth. Zen doesn't teach you to add anything to your mind. It teaches you to turn off the noisy lamps so you can see the moon that's always here right now in this very moment. You don't need to learn more tonight. You just need to pause and quietly look. Sutta couldn't find the moon because his own lamp stirred the water. But when he turned it off, the moon returned not because it came back, but because it had never left. There are nights when your mind feels like an empty house. Then suddenly, uninvited guests appear, an old memory, a vague worry, a hurtful word someone once said, or just a wave of negative thought passing by. You try to push them away. Close the doors, cover your ears, look elsewhere. But strangely, the more you resist them, the longer they stay. Ray once experienced this during his early days of meditation. He thought meditation was meant to bring perfect stillness, a mind free of disturbance. But he was mistaken. The harder he tried to chase thoughts away, the louder they became. Only when he shifted his approach from resisting to welcoming did transformation begin. Ray had come to meditation seeking refuge. Life outside was too loud, too crowded, full of ringing phones, endless emails, people, and expectations. He had tried yoga, read books on mindfulness, even spent weeks at a retreat center. But the one thing he had never truly done was sit quietly, alone. So every night when the city lights dimmed beyond his window, Ray lit a small candle, sat cross-legged on a round indigo cushion, and closed his eyes. He believed that if he sat long enough, his mind would settle like a lake when the wind stops. But it didn't. Each time he closed his eyes, uninvited guests arrived, a thought about unfinished work, the image of someone who had left without goodbye, a vague fear about health money, or the meaninglessness of life itself. They came without knocking loud enough to pull him away from his breath. At first, Ray tried to fight them. He clenched his jaw, tightened his body, and commanded his mind to be silent. But the more he tried, the more chaotic it became, like standing in the middle of a busy intersection trying to stop all the traffic with a single wave of the hand. One night, after yet another failed meditation, Ray went to see an old Zen master. He sometimes saw walking slowly by the lake, his steps calm, as if moving through his own heart. Master Ray sighed, I can't find peace. My mind is like a house with someone knocking at the door all night. I try to ignore it, but the knocking only grows louder. How do I make it stop? The master didn't answer right away. He poured tea and slid a cup toward Ray. When someone knocks at your door at night, he asked, "What do you do?" Ray thought for a moment. "I'd check who it is. If it's important, I'd open the door. If not, maybe I'd stay quiet and pretend I didn't hear." The master smiled. "As for me," he said, "I invite them in. I let them sit. I pour them tea. I don't ask questions. When they know they're not being pushed away, they leave on their own." Ray blinked in confusion. The master looked gently into his eyes and said, "Don't drive them out. Invite them in, greet them, then let them go." It wasn't a technique. It was a way of living, a guide for anyone who has turned their own mind into a battlefield where every thought is treated as an enemy. That night, Ray sat again. He didn't try to reach a deep state of silence. He didn't force his breath to stay even. He simply sat like a host who leaves the door open. When a voice in his head said, "You're useless. You can't do anything right," he didn't push it away or argue back. He just whispered, "Ah, an old guest. Welcome." Then he breathed again. When the image of his former lover appeared, he didn't reject it, nor did he cling to it. He simply watched, felt it drift through like a breeze through a curtain. Cold for a moment, then gone. His mind was no longer a fortress to be guarded, but a warm tea room where every guest was served a cup of silence. And strangely, none of the guests stayed long. When not judged, they had no reason to linger. When not held onto, they faded like warmth disappearing from a teacup. After a while, Ray opened his eyes. The night was still the same. The city outside was still loud. But inside him, something had settled, not by force, but by acceptance. And that quiet acceptance became the foundation of lasting peace. In meditation, the goal isn't to banish thoughts, but to see them clearly without being swept away. A thought is just a thought. It isn't you. It comes and it goes. But we often mistake our thoughts for who we are and then get caught in them like fish tangled in a net. Mindfulness in the Zen spirit is not emptiness or escape from life. It is presence, full awareness of whatever is here. When anger arises, we see anger. When fear arises, we see fear. When laziness, doubt, or anxiety arise, we can still sit, breathe, and observe without reacting. The mind is like a lake. If you keep stirring it, the water becomes muddy. But if you stop interfering, everything settles, and the surface returns to stillness. Peace doesn't come from control. It comes from wise non-interference. The Buddha gave a simple example. Do not try to extinguish a flame by blowing on it. Just stop blowing, and it will go out on its own. In modern life, we keep blowing on our minds with pressure, expectation, and the endless desire to reach something higher. But the harder we try to be calm, the more restless we become. True stillness arises only when we stop interfering. Mindfulness is not a battle. It is not about forcing yourself to stop thinking. It is about acceptance, sitting with whatever comes and goes. Like an open porch, the wind enters, then leaves. You don't need to hold it. You don't need to close the door. You just sit quietly, listen, and know it's only wind. Your mind is the house. You are the mindful host. You neither chase away nor cling. You simply open the door, offer each guest a cup of tea made of awareness, and let them leave when it's time. When Ray sat with his night guests, the thoughts and emotions that once terrified him, he stopped trying to fight them. And because of that, they became lighter. Not because they disappeared, but because he stopped resisting them. His mind expanded wide, unbounded. And within that gentle acceptance, he touched a deeper kind of freedom, the kind he once thought he had to achieve by conquering his inner world. Have you ever held on to something that was already falling apart simply because it once meant everything to you? Sometimes we cling to a broken relationship, a faded dream, or a role that no longer fits us, not because it's still right, but because we're afraid to let go. This is the story of Ami, a young woman who spent all her strength trying to patch a sinking boat, until one old man asked her a single simple question, and in that moment, she realized something she had forgotten she knew how to swim. Ami rowed her small wooden boat every day across a quiet lake where mist would often drift like a thin silk veil over the water. The boat was old, its planks faded gray from years of sun and rain, but she kept it spotless. It wasn't just transportation, it was memory. It was the last gift her father had given her before he passed away. It was the boat that once carried her to school on foggy mornings, the boat that brought her and her father across the lake to deliver firewood to the temple, to pick vegetables, or sometimes just to sit quietly and fish together in the stillness of the afternoon. After her father's death, Ami continued using that same boat to ferry village children to school, to carry firewood, vegetables, and fruit, just as her father had done. In her heart, she felt she was continuing something unfinished, a silent promise to him and to herself. Then one morning, Ami noticed a few damp spots at the bottom of the boat. She thought it was just leftover water, but by evening, there was another patch longer, deeper. The next day, out in the middle of the lake, water began seeping in. She panicked, but not enough to lose control. Ami was used to fixing things. She brought wood glue, patched one spot, stuffed another with an old raincoat tied off the edges with cloth. She believed that if she tried hard enough, she could save the boat. She had to. It was all she had left of her father. But week by week, things only got worse. More leaks, wider cracks. Until one morning, while ferrying children across, she found herself rowing with one hand and bailing water with the other. Her body trembled from exhaustion. Sweat soaked her back. Her hands were sticky with resin and blood from splinters. But still, she refused to stop. Because if she lost the boat, she thought she would lose the last piece of her father, the last piece of herself. Then one day, alone in the middle of the lake, the boat began to sink rapidly. This time, it wasn't trickling water. It was pouring in through a gaping hole. Ami panicked. She scooped water with her hat, smeared resin with her hands, covered the holes with her clothes. But it was useless. The water kept rising. Her vision blurred from sunlight, from tears, or from despair she didn't know. An old man in another boat paddled quietly toward her. His hair was white, his eyes calm, the kind that had seen many people struggle against their own pasts. He looked at her sinking boat, then at her. "Do you know how to swim?" he asked. Ami nodded. "Then why don't you swim to shore?" His tone wasn't advice or command, it was simply a question. But that question cut through her like a blade. she realized she still had everything she needed to save herself. She had always been the best swimmer in her village. She had just forgotten that she could survive without the boat, because she was too busy trying to save what was meant to be let go. For the first time, Ami looked at the boat, not with her heart, but with truth. It could no longer hold her. And what broke her wasn't the sinking. It was the long effort to deny that it was sinking. She took a deep breath. She dropped the oar. She stopped covering the leaks. She stopped trying to rescue what could no longer be saved. Gently, she slid into the water and began to swim. The water was cool and alive. The sky suddenly felt vast. There was no one there to witness it, no audience, no applause, just a woman swimming away from a sinking boat feeling lighter than she ever had before. She didn't look back. She didn't regret. And in letting go, she lost nothing. She only found herself again. In life, many things once carry us through difficult crossings, a habit, a relationship, a belief. But like the boat, some things are only meant for part of the journey. When they begin to leak, it's not because they are bad. It's simply time to release them. The Buddha once told a story about a raft. A man uses a raft to cross the river, but after reaching the other shore, he still carries the raft on his back. That is not wisdom. Sometimes what drowns us isn't bad karma, but the good things we refuse to let go of when their time has passed. Are you trying to save a sinking boat in your own life? A relationship without respect? A job that only drains you? An image of yourself that no longer fits who you are? Before you sleep tonight, ask yourself, how much energy am I using to hold on to something that's already sinking? And have I forgotten that I can still swim? Neuroscience shows that the brain consumes huge amounts of energy, maintaining old connections even when they no longer serve our happiness. Writing things down and reflecting helps the brain update those old patterns. You don't need to let go all at once. You can start by simply looking at your boat. Mindfulness isn't only about being present, it's also about recognizing what in the present no longer nourishes you. Many mistake compassion for endurance, believing they must hold on, stay patient, and suffer quietly through what has already run dry. But the truth is, compassion for others is often easier than compassion for yourself. We forgive others for walking away, but we rarely forgive ourselves for wanting to stop. We cling to an old job, an old relationship, an old dream, not because they still serve us, but because they once gave us purpose, faith, or comfort when we needed it most. But everything has its time. Some boats are meant to carry you across the river. Once you've reached the shore, the kindest thing you can do is to let go. Letting go does not mean failure. It does not mean betrayal of the past. Letting go is a deep act of wisdom, a quiet acknowledgement that you deserve to live not by memory, but by the life that is here now. Ami did not abandon her father when she left the boat. She began to live as he would have wanted, with her own hands, her own breath, and her own freedom. And that was the greatest gift she could offer him, and herself. There are things that keep repeating in life like a familiar scratch on a record, the same kind of person who hurts you, the same type of situation that makes you angry, the same emotion that rises again, just when you think you've finally found peace. And once again, you ask, Why do I keep running into this? Nori once asked the same question. She thought she was moving forward, but in truth, she was only struggling around the same old stone. It wasn't until she finally sat down that something extraordinary happened. Nori lived in a small wooden house nestled in green mountains, where a winding gravel path led through the pine forest toward an old temple in the distance. She walked that path every day, sometimes carrying vegetables to the market, sometimes visiting the abbot, sometimes simply breathing in the stillness of morning. But along that beautiful trail, one thing always irritated her: a stone. It wasn't big enough to block the way completely, but tall enough to make people tiptoe step aside or squeeze past. More than once, Nori almost tripped. Once she twisted her ankle. Another time, she dropped an entire basket of vegetables. She would glare at the stone and mutter, "Why won't anyone move this thing?" Then she'd keep walking, slipping by, frowning, shaking her head, carrying a trace of irritation into the rest of her day. Until one morning, something inside her was simply too tired. The night before, she had argued with someone close to her, cold words, blame and tears that wouldn't go down. She had tossed and turned, feeling trapped in a small, airless box with no way out. When dawn came, it was the same path as always, light filtering through the trees, birds calling softly between branches, and at that familiar bend, the same stone. But this time, when her foot caught on it, Nori didn't curse. She didn't try to go around. Her legs just stopped, as if she had no energy left to react. And she sat down, leaning her back against the very thing she had always blamed. For the first time, instead of resisting, instead of trying to overcome, she just sat. The morning wind brushed through her hair. Sunlight danced across the ground between the leaves. Her breath slowed, and in a fragile moment as delicate as morning dew, she realized something had changed. She turned to look at the stone, but it was gone. In its place was only a thin layer of mist sinking into the earth beneath her. She reached out to touch it, only cool air melting in her palm as if it had never been there. Was it an illusion, a miracle, or simply awakening? Deep down, she knew the stone, or anything that had tripped her for years, had never truly caused her pain. It was her resistance that did, the belief that it shouldn't be here, the endless reaction repeating itself like a program running on loop. When she stopped fighting, stopped pushing against what was everything that once hurt her, simply disappeared. Not because it was gone, but because she was no longer entangled in it. That day, Nori didn't continue toward the temple. She stayed sitting quietly in the forest beside the empty space where the stone had been. And she smiled, not because she had overcome something, but because she no longer needed to. Later travelers on that same path would say there used to be a stone there, but no one could recall exactly what it looked like or when it had vanished. Only Nori knew sometimes the stone isn't on the path. It's in the mind. In Buddhism, there is a deep wisdom called seeing things as they are. No stories added, no truths subtracted, no instant reaction, no habitual resistance. Because most suffering doesn't come from events themselves, but from how we respond to them. A simple word of criticism, if you don't hold on to it, passes like wind across the surface of a lake. But if you resist it, analyze it, defend against it, replay it, it's no longer just wind. It becomes a blade cutting deeper each time. Like the stone on Nori's path, the stone never changed. Yet every morning her hurried steps, restless mind, and quiet irritation made her stumble into pain again and again. The stone represents what cannot be changed: karma, the past circumstances, the nature of others. But it is your inner resistance that causes lasting pain. Before you go to sleep tonight, look at your own habits. What are you thinking about? Unfinished conversations, words left unsaid, moments you wish you had handled differently. Your body may be lying down, but your mind is still standing still, running still, bracing itself against the invisible stones in your head. Tonight, instead of struggling, try sitting down inside. Try this simple practice. As you inhale, notice a stone arising, a memory, a reproach, a feeling of defeat. As you exhale, don't run away from it. Don't try to push it out. Just sit with it. No explanation, no fixing, no right or wrong. Healing doesn't come from forcing yourself to be better. Healing comes from being fully present with what is without judgment. It's not the fall that hurts. It's the struggle after the fall inside the mind. It's not others who wound you. It's the noise inside that hasn't yet learned to sit still and see that pain itself can be embraced. So try sitting down right beside what you fear most. Stop asking, when will this go away? Because strangely enough, when the mind becomes quiet enough, fear melts like mist under sunlight. Nori didn't overcome the stone through effort. She didn't move it by strength. She simply sat, and from that moment, she was no longer ruled by reaction. She became a mindful traveler, someone who can walk through darkness without needing to carry a lantern, guided only by the stillness within. And you know what? You can do the same tonight, with your very next breath, with a gentle look toward yourself. Have you ever felt yourself being swept along by a current without knowing where you're going? Have you ever looked around and seen everyone running? So you ran too, even though you weren't sure why. Kenta once lived like that. Until one day, he wore a watch that ran backward, and what everyone called strange became a mirror that showed him the direction of his own life. Kenta was a longtime watchmaker who lived in a small village at the foot of the mountains. His little shop was simple, but always full of visitors, local villagers bringing in old watches for repair, or travelers drawn in by the faint scent of machine oil and the soft tick-tock echoing inside. Kenta loved precision. He was fascinated by how tiny gears could move in harmony to measure something invisible, yet universally obeyed time. He collected watches from all over, antique French pendulums, wristwatches from the 1940s, even a cracked sundial he had once bought on a distant journey. One autumn morning, while cleaning out an old storage box behind his shop, he found a peculiar watch. It rested quietly in a dark wooden case lined with faded velvet. When he wound it up and set it on the table, he froze. The minute hand was moving backward. Not just the minute hand, the hour hand, too slowly and steadily turning left. At first, Kenta frowned. Who messed up this mechanism? How odd. He picked up his screwdriver to fix it, but something made him stop. For reasons he couldn't explain, he decided to leave it as it was. Then, half in jest and half in curiosity, he decided to wear it. On the first day, his friends laughed. That watch is broken. Why wear something that runs backward? It'll drive you crazy. It looks ridiculous. Kenta only smiled, but something stirred quietly inside him. Every time he looked at his wrist, instead of knowing what time it is, he was reminded to ask, where am I going? Am I moving towards something true, or just away from myself? And gradually that backward watch became a mirror. One day, he was about to sign a contract to open a new branch because everyone said it was the right thing to do. But glancing at the watch, he paused and thought, if no one expected this from me, would I still want it? Another evening, he stood for a long time watching people leaving work, hurried, tired eyes glued to their phones, hearts tightening around their schedules. He looked down again at the backward-moving hands, quiet, steady, unafraid of being late. A week later, an old Zen master stopped by to have the temple bell repaired. While waiting, the master noticed the watch on Kenta's wrist. He didn't laugh, nor did he ask. He just smiled gently and said, "That watch isn't wrong. It simply reminds its wearer, don't chase forward, turn back." The words sank into Kenta's heart like water into long dry soil. He said nothing, just nodded slowly like the steady hour hand gliding backward on his wrist. From that day on, Kenta kept wearing the watch. He no longer measured time by the minutes that passed, but by the depth of a single question. Is the way I'm living bringing me closer to truth? The watch didn't just turn back time. It turned back his awareness, reminding him that sometimes moving against the crowd is the straightest path home to oneself. The Buddha once said, "The wise do not walk in the footsteps of others. They observe the footprints of their own." That simple yet profound truth is a reminder for anyone rushing forward while forgetting to see where they've come from. Modern society teaches us to always move ahead to achieve more, do more, shine more. But Zen whispers softly, sometimes the path of evolution isn't the path forward, it's the path back. Back to yourself, back to your breath, back to the fullness of the present moment. A backward-moving watch may look wrong, but in a world obsessed with speed, it becomes a symbol of reverse wisdom. It doesn't tell you to stop time. It asks you to pause and see where time is carrying you. Ask yourself, what do you usually do before going to sleep? Check unanswered messages, scroll through social media to see what others are doing. Think about what you haven't finished. All of that is moving forward. But few ever learn the essential art of returning to the breath, returning to the steady rhythm of your heartbeat, returning to the question, where is my mind right now? The backward watch is like a mirror, not to measure time, but to measure awareness. It doesn't tell you to stop. It simply whispers, return to where it all began. Not everyone who moves fast reaches their destination, and not everyone who follows the crowd is truly living their own life. Before you sleep tonight, let each evening become your backward clock. Pause not to give up, but to listen. Ask yourself, does what I'm doing nourish my peace? Does this relationship make me shine or make me smaller? And the way I'm living today, is it truly me? Sometimes the quietest voice inside you, the one you often ignore, is your real compass. If it tells you to turn left while everyone turns right, have the courage to listen. Kenta didn't wear his backward watch to know what time it was, but to know whose time am I really living in. And in that moment, time stopped being a force that pushed him forward and became a space that guided him home. In this world, we learn to define ourselves through reflections, through what others say about us, the success we achieve, the image we create. But there is an old question that few ever answer completely. Who am I when I am no longer playing any role? Miwa, a woman who always lived up to expectations, one day found herself disappearing from the mirror. And from that moment, she began to see more clearly. Miwa grew up in an old village nestled on a hillside, famous for its traditional glass-making craft. In that place, every home had at least one handmade mirror, created by skillful artisans and passed down through generations as a symbol of inner reflection. From a young age, Miwa was taught something that seemed simple, yet became deeply ingrained in her heart. Look into the mirror to know who you are. And she believed it as an absolute truth. Every day, Miwa stood before the mirror for a long time. She brushed her hair until not a strand was out of place. She practiced speaking gently. She rehearsed smiling at the right angle. She refined every gesture and every look to appear graceful and kind. She learned to become a likable person in everyone's eyes. The mirror was her standard. If it reflected a pleasing version of herself, it meant she had done well that day. And if someone praised her, she would look in the mirror again even longer. The clearer the reflection, the more Miwa felt she was becoming better. But one day, everything changed. That morning, as usual, she stood before the mirror. But strangely, the mirror no longer showed her reflection. It reflected nothing at all, just a still, colorless, lightless surface. Panicked, she wiped the mirror, changed the lighting, carried it into the sunlight, even tried other mirrors. But no matter what, she did not. A single one reflected her image anymore. Miwa trembled. She felt as if she had vanished, as if without seeing herself in the mirror she no longer existed. Not knowing where to find an answer, she went to see an old Zen master known by the villagers as the one who needs no mirror. She sat down, bowed deeply, and said in fear, "Master, I can't see myself anymore. The mirror no longer reflects me. What's happening? Have I disappeared?" The master didn't answer right away. He slowly poured tea, handed her a cup, let the silence rest for a while, then said, "Perhaps you've polished the mirror until there's nothing left to reflect." Miwa looked at him in astonishment. He continued, his voice gentle as the morning breeze, "And the very moment when there's nothing left to reflect, that is when you touch your true face. Not the good face others like, not the image you've learned to please the world, but the nameless, colorless essence, clear as still water." Miwa didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She only sat in silence. For the first time in her life, she felt empty. Yet strangely, that emptiness didn't frighten her. It felt light. It felt spacious, as if a shell had just fallen away and she no longer needed to pick it up. She stood bowed and left without asking for more words. On the way home, the wind played through her hair. The sky seemed clearer. The simplest sounds, footsteps rustling, leaves, the faraway temple bell resonated softly within her chest. That night, Miwa didn't look into a mirror. She brewed a cup of tea and sat quietly gazing into the courtyard. The water in the basin reflected the moon, not sharply, not perfectly, but with a deeper truth present within it. No one asked Miwa anymore, "How do you look today?" And she no longer needed to know. Because from the day the mirror stopped reflecting, she began to truly see herself without any glass in between. In Zen, true seeing does not come from the eyes, it comes from the mind. The Buddha once said, "One who sees with a clear mind sees all forms return to emptiness." We spend our entire lives constructing an image of ourselves: good, right, strong, kind, humble, lovable. But all of it is just layers, masks, reflections worn so long that we forget we're wearing them. We don't just act, we forget that we are acting. We become the role, the devoted mother, the selfless father, the dutiful child, the respected leader, the model monk. But when we are the role, we can no longer be the one who sees. Zen does not teach us to play a better role. Zen teaches us to see the one who is acting. And only when the mirror no longer reflects, as in Miwa's story, do we have the chance to truly see. As long as there's an image, we keep reacting, comparing, adjusting. But when all images disappear, what remains is clarity. Like still water, untouched by wind, like a mind untouched by grasping. Before you go to sleep tonight, ask yourself gently, what did I live for today? Did I do anything just so others would like me? Did I avoid saying something because I was afraid to lose my role? You don't need to change anything right away. You don't need to abandon anything. You don't need to make any big decision. Just see. Mindfulness begins with seeing without judgment. This seeing doesn't rush to fix, doesn't strain to improve, doesn't turn you into a project that needs upgrading. And strangely, when you let go of the need to be someone, you begin to truly be present. Neuroscience has shown that when the brain no longer needs to maintain too many social roles, the parasympathetic nervous system, the one responsible for relaxation, healing, and deep sleep, becomes more active. In other words, when you stop pretending, your brain can breathe, and your body, for the first time in the day, is allowed to rest. So you don't need to disappear like the mirror, but you can try this. Remove one layer of expectation. Pause for a moment from chasing an image. Sit quietly with yourself without any definition. When Miwa stopped seeing herself in the mirror, she truly saw, not because she lost herself, but because she touched the deepest part, the one beyond all roles. You are not the successful one. You are not the failed one. You are not the righteous one. You are not the kind one. You are not the strong one. You are simply presence, awake, clear, transparent. And sometimes the most profound realization is not understanding who you are, but stopping the effort to become someone. Miwa didn't need a new mirror. She only needed to let go of the question, who should I be? And when there was no one left to become, she returned to the peace that had always been there. You can return too. Tonight, throughout this journey, we've walked through ancient yet timeless stories. The one who stood before the gate but dared not step in. The one who lit a lamp to find the moon already shining. The one who carried too many memories to hear the silence. The one who kept patching a sinking boat instead of swimming to shore. And the one who looked into the mirror and disappeared to truly see. These stories don't tell you to understand something new. They simply whisper what you once knew but forgot, not knowing, not holding, not pretending, not fearing uncertainty. Only when we lay down the burden of needing to know, to be right, to be loved, to succeed, do we finally step into the silent gate where peace needs no definition. Thank you for walking with me through tonight's journey. A journey not to seek more answers, but to pause and see what has always been here. Through each story we've seen, not every effort leads to results. Not every pain needs to be fixed. Not every leaking boat needs to be saved. And not every striving to be someone leads to peace. Sometimes peace begins with letting go. We've met Mika, who tried to block her thoughts to find silence, only to realize that letting them flow made the waves still. We've passed the backward clock, the unopened door, the mirror that stopped reflecting, and at every turn, the message remained the same. Awakening doesn't come from trying to understand it, comes from being present. To be truly present without ego, without grasping. As the Buddha taught, letting go is not rejecting life, it is releasing what is not truly you. And as the Heart Sutra says, because there is emptiness, there is no fear. Freed from delusion, one reaches nirvana. Not knowing, not holding, not pretending, not fearing uncertainty. This is not weakness. This is the deepest courage to lay down the burden of becoming and simply return to being breathing alive here. Only when you release the weight of needing to know, to be right, to be loved, to succeed, does your mind become light enough to open the silent gate to peace, the peace that was never missing, just waiting within you. If tonight's stories have touched something in your heart, please like, share, and leave a comment so I can hear your reflections. And don't forget to subscribe to Buddhism Seeds, so each night you can return, sit down and breathe with the seeds of peace within you. Wishing you a deep night, a gentle sleep, and a quiet return in every breath. Good night.